Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Anto, and today we're going to explore a little bit what I think is going to be the future of documentation management. If you have been following me for a while, in previous videos I was discussing about the importance of documentation and in some cases why the standard tools that we're using are not sufficient for technical documentation. I think there was a specific video where I was talking about Confluence. You can find the link up here or down in the description. And in those videos, I was highlighting a number of issues, one with specifically with Confluence for technical documentation. So from Atlassian, don't get me wrong, I don't have any problem with Confluence for documentation inside the organization, but it's more for technical documentation, and I think it's never been the purpose to use Confluence for technical documentation. So the issues that I highlighted in that video were essentially four. The first one was fluidity of content. The second one was about versioning, how you can version and how you can have versions as a first-class citizens inside your documentation. And then the controlling duplication was the other one. And in the end was also being able to create a workflow around your documentation in order to keep it consistent and make sure that there is a process, especially when you want to release documentation that is technical and has a cadence. This is one of the things. So in that video, I was also suggesting to use custom tools like Docusaurus or using Gitbooks or other tools that require quite a considerable amount of effort on the engineering side, because you need to engineer your own solution. And obviously, whenever you engineer something to do engineering, you're not developing your core business. And I think engineers in an organization should try to focus mostly on what is the core business of their company, because that's essentially what is bringing revenues, instead of focusing on anything else. So I think that video resonated with many people. I got quite a number of comments on those videos, and I also been contacted by a company. So this is a sponsored video. I was contacted by Document360. I never used Document360 before, and they asked me for a honest review. We had a chat, obviously, and I told them that I will give my honest opinion and trying to figure out if Document360 will address all the 4 pain points that I identified with Confluence. So I'm going to show you what I have done and how I explored the interface so far. I will explore more the tool in the coming weeks to do more in-depth videos. So if you want to know a specific feature of Document360, just comment down below, and I would be happy to investigate for you and let you know what is my opinion and how to use that. But now let's have a look a little bit at Document360. So when I open my browser and log in into Document360, this is the dashboard that you see. So there is an initial dashboard, and then you can navigate using this panel on the side. The documentation tab here is gonna give you an overview of your document structure. And you have a site builder where you can customize few things. One thing I've done for this was to specify the domain name. So I decided to use a custom domain name. So it's using my outofdevops.com. I just had a domain pointing to that. So docs.outofdevops.com. And I made it private. Setting up this was extremely simple. I just had to add the entry in my DNS, and that was done. So the verification happened, and also the documentation is quite clear from this point of view. So you can have a look at this and you can see what is needed to configure the DNS. But this is not the key focus. There are some features that I want to show. Essentially, I want to address every single one of the 4 points. So the first one was fluidity of content, where the content can constantly change, so you lose confidence in that. And I think this goes hands in hands with the lack of workflow and creation of a process around that. So now, if we explore a little bit more the content tools, for example, we can see that there is a way to design a workflow. So this workflow essentially is how teams will introduce new articles and what is the process to introduce new articles. So essentially now we have a very simple workflow, which is including a draft, in review, and published statuses. But if you want, you can add as many statuses as you want. You can add more statuses in this, and this will help you creating more complex workflows. There are also useful things like setting article review reminders. So I think these are very advanced use cases for when you are operating this as a team. Obviously, in my little demo, I don't have a team, so it would be hard to demonstrate those things. And where I want to focus is a little bit more on the actual content and how to address all the other pain points. So the second pain point I wanted to address was the versioning. So now if you navigate back to the dashboard, in the dashboard you can see on the top there is a version, right? So there are I call this V1, V2, you can call it the way you prefer, but you have two distinctions here. You have your knowledge base and you have your API documentation. So I'm not going to look at the API documentation today, but I want to focus on the knowledge base. So essentially, let's say we are evolving a product internally. So I work as a platform engineer. So we have a platform we are treating as a product, and whenever we release a new version of the platform, we want to make sure the documentation is consistent and we don't have different versions conflicting with each other at the same time. So in Document360, you can essentially create what they call a workspace to manage multiple versions. And in here we have main workspace for knowledge base is V1, and then we have V2 as well. When you switch here, you essentially have an entire new dashboard that is targeting your V1 or V2. So this is the way you switch, and I'm going to show you in a sec how that will appear. So if I go on my docs.autodevops.com, you will see that at the top you have the distinction between the two versions. And this is very similar to what I described in the other video, where you have Docusaurus giving you a drop-down menu where you can navigate the different versions. So when you switch on the second one, you can manage as an exact copy and you can make the differences. So your documentation and the consumer of the documentation will never be confused about what they're using. So I think for as simple this can look like, this is a missing thing in Confluence. You cannot do this, right? And then if we want to navigate the documentation, here we have some pages, and that's how it's going to look. I think also the look and feel is very nice. You can customize a little bit the font and then the style. And I think you can also add your custom CSS and JavaScript if you want. So now if I go back to the dashboard, one of the features that I liked is the integration with GitHub. So if I go back here and I show you under knowledge base portal, if you go under extensions, you can have a connection directly with GitHub. And the way it works, you can synchronize a repository. So I have my repo here, and I'm going to show you the content on my repo. So I can go on GitHub. So this is a pretty simple repo. It contains a docs folder, and this is one of the instructions you need to follow. So any document that you want to be served by Document360 must live under the docs folder. And if you have static assets like images, you need to put them under Document360 assets. So in my case, I have this image is everything generated with AI, is just a template, and I asked ChatGPT to generate a document to describe how to create ECR for people using AWS. Probably you're familiar with ECR, and how to create that and generate that in Markdown. And I've added the picture, so I also asked to generate a picture. This picture doesn't really make any sense, but it's just for the demo purposes of Document360. So now, if I go in my knowledge base website, so if I go back to this, which is docs.autodevops.com, and I open the documentation, so you should see that under tutorials I have how to create ECR repos, right? So I want to put them side by side, and the title, so this title page is coming from the file name, how to create ECR repos, and the content is coming from the Markdown file. So I'm gonna do a live change now. So what we can do, we can remove, for example, the number 5, the point number 5. And I'm gonna commit. So this will sync in a couple of seconds. So before refreshing the page, I want to show you what is on the dashboard side. So if we go back to the dashboard, and so this is the GitHub extension. Once you configure the extension, you will be asked where you want to place your page, and I decided to place it under these tutorials. So under tutorials, you have the content of the repo essentially. And so let's see. First of all, it's synchronized here. So we have 4 bullet points instead of 5. And for comparison, this is a copy of the other one. So we had 5 here. And now if I go back and I refresh the page, we can see that has been synchronized. So this is why I think this is a killer feature, especially for developers, is because developers are more familiar using coding tools. GitHub is the perfect example. Also, it's going to be, it's a principle that I try to follow, where I want always to keep the documentation as close as possible to the code. So whenever you do a code change, keeping the documentation in sync is very useful. So you can build additional workflows that are even more familiar for developers, where they can use the tools that they love, like GitHub, instead of learning another tool like Document360. So what you can have a nice separation between the product management that will focus around the structure of the knowledge base and the structure of your documentation website or your APIs or whatever. And then you have the engineers that will focus on the actual content. So I think this will simplify and address most of the points that we talked about, because the duplication will be under control and it needs to be integrated. So we know that there is one repo containing that, and we know exactly who's going to be the responsible team for updating a documentation when there is a version change. On top of that, you can also add a workflow that is more developer friendly, because you can have pull request etiquette where you can specify how to raise a change in the documentation, and you can also create a pipeline that will do a scan or validation. And I think Document360 will open infinite options for developers, and also if you want to manage your documentation more as a product. So in this quick demo, I've just scratched the surface of Document360, but I can already see that they were right. So when they contacted me, they were very confident about the tool. So they didn't give me any specific instruction what to say, how to say it. So I want to make sure you perceive this as a honest review. One thing that I want to mention is that I had a couple of issues at the beginning in synchronizing GitHub, and I reached out to them and they immediately offered support. They shared a video on how to do it, and it was extremely easy to follow along. I also shared with them my feedback on the documentation and where they can probably improve the clarity of the docs, and they accepted that, and probably they're going to reflect that in the documentation soon. It would be nice to see that as well. So I will feel I contributed a little bit to Document360 success. So if you want to know if I like Document360, I think has a great potential. It's a very good tool. I would like to explore a little bit more, because there are a number of features that are really interesting for me. For example, there is the notifications. Essentially, Document360 can notify some channels. So I haven't explored that, but my understanding from what I've read is that you can notify specific channels, like you can send emails, or you can do Slack integration or other things. So whenever there is an event in your project, an update in your project, you can configure the different type of events and you can notify all these channels, which is extremely useful, at least in my case, when you are trying to build a platform as a product and the tenants of the platform, the consumers of the platform, want to be notified when there is a new feature, or when there is a breaking change, or when there are things that they need to know. So I think all these go way beyond my original idea that I described in the other video, and it's way easier to implement because you are using a tool that has already been designed with that in mind. There are also additional things like AI features that I haven't even started touching, and there is also the enterprise integration for having a login to the system that is using single sign-on, but I will probably touch on all these other topics in future videos. Let me know down in the comment which features you would like me to explore, and I will be happy to make another video about Document360. In the meantime, thank you for watching and see you in the next one. Bye!